Something. Good?
Clap board. Get one for Christmas.
Okay, good. All right, so through mid-September through mid-October, I stayed on 2 different organic farms in the Carolinas. It was through a program called WWOOFing, as Jen just explained about. It stands for Worldwide Opportunities on Organic Farms. And so you are a woofer when you participate in the program. And it is started in London by a woman, and it's spread all over the world. It's like 60 plus countries participate in this. Farms sign up, they meet certain certifications, so being organic is obviously one of them. They range in size, some have animals, some don't, some have fruit, vegetables, etc. In the US, every state participates. There's at least one in all 50. I think California had like over 250 that participated. It was insane. There were a ton out there. But I found some that were a little closer to home, so I went to North Carolina first, then to South Carolina, and then I actually went back to the farm in North Carolina because I liked that one so much. So today I'm going to talk to you about my experience at the farm, but first I'm going to talk to you what I learned technically from the farmer. So about the soil, about disease management, organic treatments for bugs and pests, stuff that you can really apply to the garden and in your plot. And the quote that's up there, "Feed the soil, not the plant," that was in almost every book that the farmer gave me to read. He gave me a lot of books, which I loved, and I read them all. But this is a really important quote, and it kept coming up. So I'll explain a little bit what that means. But first, what is healthy soil? So this is kind of like the scientific stuff that you just got to get out of the way in the beginning. So really to understand what you're dealing with, what's in your soil, so how can you make it healthier and make your plants healthier? So pretty much it's comprised of 4 components. So the chart up there, there's air, water, minerals, and then organic matter, which is further broken down. So the mineral portion is sand, sit, or clay. It depends on the area. It could be a combination of all 3. And organic matter is decomposing plant and animal residue. And you can see there's humus, there's roots, there's organisms, there's different parts to the organic matter, but that's the really important part. So there's different elements. There's carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, nitrogen, sulfur, and phosphorus, all within that organic matter. So it's extremely good for the soil. You need that. That's how your plants get and maintain their health. It's often in the form of humus, which is dark and crumbly. That's very good. It's the top layer of the soil. Let's see. And then there's often considered a 5th component, which would be anything from bacteria to beneficial insects. So it's not on the, well, I guess organisms that would count. But it's often considered a 5th component separate from the organic matter. So there was a book called The Soul of Soil. I'll give you references at the end. It's like one of the last slides that has a bunch of books and resources that the farmer gave me. And this will be posted online, so you can copy. You don't have to write everything down. But The Soul of Soil was great. It really explained what's in your soil, about pH, about nutrient balance, all that stuff. So I'd highly recommend reading that if you're interested in helping your soil. So good tilth. That means the soil should be crumbly. It should be cake-like. So it's the feel of the soil when you pick it up in your hand. Worms secrete gums that help to hold the soil together. And pore space, you need adequate pore space that allows water and air to penetrate in the soil. You don't want it really compact. It's not good. So the pH, generally between 6.3 and 6.8 is a good pH for the plants, and it allows optimum availability of the nutrients are available to the plants at that pH range. And I'll talk to you a little bit about if it's too acidic or it's too alkaline and kind of how to fix that. And it's also, that pH is good for the bacteria in the soil too, so not just the plants. Okay, so in order for them to grow healthy, your plants, you need macro and micronutrients. Just as humans, we also need macro and micronutrients. So the 3 main macronutrients are nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And those are the ones that are going to be in fertilizer. Those are the 3 main ones that you'd be concerned about. So they're needed in the highest quality, hence they're macro. So secondary macronutrients, calcium, magnesium, and sulfur, so needed in a little less quantity, but still very important for the soil. And then there are 7 micronutrients, so I'll just read them real fast. They are boron, copper, iron, chloride, magnesium, manganese, manganese, look very similar, molybdenum, and zinc. So lesser amounts, again, but still very important for the soil to prevent disease and deficiencies. So when you're adding, this is interesting, when you're adding micronutrients, so if you're adding a specific like rock powder or something to the soil, if it's chelated, that's best, natural chelated, so it will slowly release. Rather synthetic, it will quickly and at the same time it'll just release itself into the soil. So that could be toxic to the plants if too much is released at once. So if it's chelated and it's natural, it'll be slowly released over time as needed by the soil. Okay, and again, returning to the quote from the beginning of the presentation, you really need to feed the soil. You are feeding the plants, so it's kind of silly to just focus on the plants. You need to start with a healthy base, a healthy foundation, a healthy soil, and that way you'll end up with healthy plants. Okay, so soil testing. I know I'd spoken, I think I probably spoke, did I speak to you about it, getting the soil tested? Okay. To you then. The farmer the first farm, he recommended getting soil tested. He does it in the fall because the agencies aren't as busy, but you can contact your local ag extension and you can get soil tested. I think all states except for North Carolina are charging, so I don't know what exactly the fee would be.
I think it's $10.
Okay. Yeah, but if we did it as a garden, he suggested taking samples from different parts of the garden, different areas, so you kind of get, you know, a mix of what's going on in what areas. But anyway, these tests will come back and tell you what you're deficient in, what you're high in. It'll give you the pH of the soil. So very useful stuff. So you know, all right, what kind of fertilizer do I need? What am I working with here? And how to make your soil healthy. And a quick tip, he adds, the first Farmer Clay, he adds legumes as a cover crop, so at the end of his season. And he also said we can add compost in the garden to supplement nitrogen levels. So in the cover crop, the legumes will die. They'll give back, it'll release the nitrogen and whatever other nutrients were in it to the soil. And it protects the soil over winter, which I'll talk about. Let's see. And also he said intercropping is good. So putting down a living mulch during the season. So you can do either mulch as leaves, hay, grass, whatever, in between plants, or plant two different non-competing plants close to one another so there isn't soil that's exposed to air and that's going to be damaged over time. So but I think in the garden that's not really too much of a concern. We're really utilizing the tiny plot that you have, but it was more a concern on the farm to not have soil exposed. Okay, and so also just lastly, because every crop contributes different nutrients to the soil and uses different nutrients, crop rotation is so important. So even within the garden, just move things around. Don't plant the same crop in one corner every year. That way you'll prevent deficiencies and excess. So he does that. I think he does, I think I'll talk about it too, but sweet potatoes, they're every 3 years. You can plant them in the same spot. For different plants, it's a different amount of time. For sweet potatoes, so he was like, I planted them here last year, and I planted them here, and then they're going over there. So, all right. So now, how do we take that knowledge and how do we apply it to the garden? So, in order to fix your soil, this is a long list. These are ones up here that he used, Farmer Clay, that he used on his plants. So he used a bunch of different things. He had a lot of different plots, and the soil was very different all over the farm, even though it was the same piece of land. It was very different. So he needed different things. They varied by the crops. So I learned a lot about different fertilizers. Any basic fertilizer is going to have a ratio with 3 different numbers, which is the nitrogen, the phosphorus, and the potassium. So up here, this is Harmony, which is an organic. There's a picture right there. It's an organic fertilizer. And so the 3 numbers, the ratio, that's how much nitrogen and phosphorus and potassium are in there. And they vary by the different fertilizers. But the most commonly one used for organic farming is Harmony. Okay, so Harmony, what it looks like, it's brown, it's granular, and it's made from poultry litter. And this is interesting because the poultry that it comes from does not have to be organic. The process has to be organic. So meaning most of them it's done by steam treatment. So you can't have any non-organic approved chemicals in the processing of it. But it does not have to be organic, the poultry that goes into making the fertilizer, which was weird to me. But that's how it is. That's the USDA approved way of doing it. So that applies to different things besides the poultry litter, which I'll talk about. Okay, so that's if you want to get across the board to boost up your soil, Harmony is a good one that he recommended. And then to get individual sources, if you get your test back and your soil is really low in nitrogen, there are different sources for that. Same with the phosphorus, potassium, calcium, etc. So sources for nitrogen include, which is kind of gross, but feathers, blood meal, and dried blood. And again, to get all those things, it doesn't have to come from an organic source, just the processing has to be organic. But it'll have the organic certification on the package when you buy it. So on the farm, he used alfalfa meal, which is also another source. And he also used the poultry feather meal. And so the percentages here, that's the percent available to the plant. So 7% of nitrogen is available in the meal. So that matters when you're adding it. If one has a higher percentage, you wouldn't need to add as much to the soil. And just to note about nitrogen, the more that's in your soil, the higher the crop yield, but the poorer the insect resistance, the worse storage quality, and lower percent dry weight. So it's kind of good and bad. So just keep it at a balance level like everything else. So sources of phosphorus, there is rock phosphate, bone meal, colloidal phosphate. Those are 3 different sources. He used par 4 bone meal, which up here, this is the ratio. So it's not just phosphorus. There's also nitrogen in it, but it's mostly phosphorus. As you can see, it's 14:2. And it also has calcium in it. It has 30% available calcium, which is interesting. And this picture on the bottom, that's tomato, and that is blossoming rot, which is caused by a deficiency of calcium in the soil. It'll also happen on peppers, but it'll happen all over the pepper, the spot where that's just like on the bottom of the tomato. So very important to know if you see that, you might be low in calcium in your soil. Okay, so mine phosphate has 3% phosphorus available. And the color, so he showed me all these different materials that he was using. So the color was white, whitish gray, and it's also known as ground clay. So that's the one that's right here. This is a different name. So some of these are from the rock powders, or others are from animals. So potassium, kelp, wood ash, granite meal, and green sand, they're all different sources of potassium. So potash, he kept saying potash, potash, potash. What is that? Potash is any salt which contains potassium in a water-soluble form. So that's all that means. So he used 3 different kinds on the farm with different availabilities. So the sulfate of potash was small white ground chips. The wood ash is a little bit different. The green sand was interesting. It's marine based. It's actually from New Jersey, he said, the kind that he gets. So there's a lot of microbes in it because it's from the ocean. And yeah, so there's just different percentages in different sources. It was just really interesting, but it looked like green sand. It was sand-like, but it was cool. It's from New Jersey. Okay, so to make the soil a little less acidic, so if you get your test back and it's too low of pH, you can add limestone, clam shells, oyster shells, or wood ashes. So limestone, which I have up here, there's calcium in it. There's also magnesium, but it's mainly the calcium that's working to raise the pH. So again, if you have a low pH and you're adding this bone meal that also has calcium, it could be doing double duty there. You could be helping your pH at the same time. Okay, and like I already mentioned before, if it's better if it's natural, if it's a natural powder or something, natural source, so it slowly releases the nutrients versus synthetic, which is going to kind of dump it in all at once and can result in toxicity. And just to note, with natural rock powders, there are the ecological costs of mining it and transporting it. Obviously, you'd be transporting an animal product too, but the processing isn't as intensive and environmentally taxing. That was pointed out in one of the books that I had read. And then foliar fertilizers, both farms that I was on use these. They use fish emulsion, but you can also use a seaweed extract. It's pretty much just you're spraying it on the leaves of the plant to help the plant growth that way. Some of it will absorb through the leaves and get into the roots of the plant, but it's mainly helping the foliage. Let's see. So you have to dilute it, which is a big thing that both farmers stressed heavily. So the first farmer, he put a cup of this fish extract into a pretty big watering can, and he said if you don't dilute it enough, it will burn the leaves, especially if it's a hot day. It'll burn the leaves of the plant. And so he would spray it on the seedlings before he would transplant them into the ground. And then after he would spray, he would go through with just watering hose and kind of wipe it off, which kind of seemed like it was defeating the purpose. But he said that he gave it enough time that the fish extract should have penetrated the leaves and gone down as it, I don't know, but that's what he did, and it seemed to work. So, and then the second farm, he also did that. He did like a couple tablespoons to a gallon, and he did it. He didn't do a second spray to wipe it off, but he did it on his seedlings right before he transplanted them. But both farmers knew what they were doing. So, okay, and we're going to go to the next slide. So, if you want to increase the organic matter, which we talked about was very important before, and any deficiency problems, you can compost. So I know you guys are interested in doing that at the garden and trying to do that. It is very important, and the first farmer I was with, he composted at the farm, not to use the compost in the farm, which is for personal use, but he did highly recommend that we do it at the garden. So the main benefit is you're adding organic matter, which is really, really important to the soil. Provides a lot of good things. So the ideal size is a 5-foot square. He said 4 feet high and about 2 tons worth in there. So the initial carbon to nitrogen ratio, which is right here, should be 25 to 30 to 1. And then as it gets going, that increases to 25 to 40 to 1. So you can have a little bit more carbon. And fertilizer layers are good for providing nitrogen. So you're layering on the green and the brown, which is that top slide there. You can see what the brown is: leaves, woody materials, wood chips, and then green, which is pretty much your food scraps and stuff from the garden. You can do manure in there too, but that's how you get your compost. So it's a combination of both. So the moisture is optimal at 60%. You want to be able to squeeze it in your hand, and then when you let go, it should stick together upon release. It shouldn't be watery, you shouldn't be squeezing anything out of it, but it shouldn't like crumble apart. It should stick together. So within 3 to 5 days of starting the pile, the temperature should get to 115 to 130 degrees. You don't want it over 140 degrees because then it'll start killing good things, good bugs in there. But you want it to get hot enough so that it does kill any disease or bad bugs, bug eggs, so that the bugs don't overwinter in there. So then in the spring, he said we can check along the outside, the perimeter of the compost pile. If we see signs of bugs, we should be able to see if there's going to be an issue. We should be able to see if there are bugs there. But he said it should, even if there was diseased plants that were put in there in the spring, that they shouldn't overwinter the disease. Let's see. And he just said spreading compost, make sure it's broken down all the way when you're spreading it. It's really important too. So that's all for that. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about row covers, as Jen started. That's neat that they're giving a class on that. That's cool. Yeah, both farmers were real big on row covers, really big on row covers. So, okay, so it's great to prevent. That would be awesome. So that's, if you can, prevent the bugs from ever getting on the plant. And then if you can't do that, then I'll talk about the treatment. But preventing is great. Row covers, which are pictured here on the top, those are good for treating a bunch of different bugs and using on a bunch of different types of vegetables, different families of vegetables. So the row covers are good for, here we go, I'm going to try to pronounce these. I can't pronounce them. Okay, squash and melon family. Tomatoes, eggplants, ground cherries, and then your kale, your cabbage, your radishes, your collards, that family. So pretty broad range, different things that you can prevent bugs from getting on. So just putting up these row covers. So pretty much it's this cloth, and then you put metal stakes every so often. And the row covers come in different thicknesses. So some are thicker, let more light in, others are a little bit thinner. So they protect against the flea beetles, cucumber beetles, striped melon beetles, a lot of different bugs, but those are just 3. So you want to place them right after you plant your little seedlings in the ground, or just your seeds in the ground. So it prevents the bugs from ever getting on them, and it allows the seedlings to get strong enough so they can defend for themselves. And so you need to take the covers off once flowers start to form on the plant, if a flower is going to start forming, or just the seedling gets big enough. But the flower thing, it needs to be pollinated, so you can't have this row cover on it because then it's not going to be pollinated by the bees. So you need to get that off. But by that point, when it's growing, it's bearing flowers, it should be strong enough to defend for itself from the bugs. Okay, let's see. Okay, so surround is kaolin clay, and it's right here, but that's what it's made of. It's made of a clay, and it's a white coating that acts as a physical barrier to the plant. So you spray it on, and the bugs physically cannot get to eat the leaf. So that is good, and it's a natural source. It's from clay. It's organic. All these are certified organic approved methods because the farms were. So it protects against, he said, aphids, grasshoppers, beetles, a lot of different kind of beetles. It also works to protect the plant against sun damage because it's a physical barrier. And it is 25-pound container is $36 at Seven Springs Farm. Seven Springs Farm was highly recommended. He said that most of these products you can find on there, and I did some research, and they're available on there. Some of these that I'll talk about are kind of expensive, but he suggested looking for the ingredient, the main ingredient that's what's treating the plant, and try to find that in a cheaper form. So, okay, so yeah, one of the books that Farmer Clay lent me suggested using catnip. So I have the question mark here. He's never used it. He doesn't really believe that it works, but he said, you know what, give it a chance. So if you guys have a cat, and you could give it the catnip afterwards, and you're not really losing out on anything. But he said that is supposed to prevent bugs if you plant it next to other crops, and it's supposed to deter them from getting on your crops. So, all right, so if your plants get infected, which many of mine did, the Helping Hands pot, you can use these different treatment methods. So the first one here, Pyganic, it is a 5% solution of pyrethrum. Pyrethrum is the ingredient that you would want to look for in another product. It is pricey. For 1 quart is $160. So that is expensive. There's a 1.5 solution available that's less expensive. But again, Clay said, look for the ingredient in a different product. This is the one that he uses. He probably buys it in bulk and gets a better deal on it. But for maybe if, I don't know, want to buy bulk supplies for the garden or something.
Yeah,
But but individually, that would be a lot. Granted, you wouldn't use that much of it. But still, that's a lot of money. Okay, so pyrethrum is a botanical insecticide. It's made from chrysanthemums. So it's best to spray this product in late afternoon when the bees are not around, because if you spray it on the bees, it'll kill them. But however, when the bees come back the next day, they'll be fine if it's still on the plant. They just can't get pyrethrum sprayed on them. So that was interesting. So the farmer had a time, all right, when can I go out and do this based on what insects are around and things. So not that he did a lot. Neither farmer really used things a lot. It was only like a last resort when they really needed to. But okay, so that's one. Javelin, WG, or Dipple, they both contain BT, Bacillus thuringiensis. It is toxic to worms, caterpillars, moths, however not most beneficial insects, not to warm-blooded animals or to humans. And again, you might look for this microbe in a different product that's a little cheaper. Clay recommended this for cabbage and tomatoes. He said it does not work for beetles, unfortunately. And BT, that word's kind of been going around. Yeah, they now genetically engineer this into different GMOs, so like soybeans and corn. So the plant will produce BT in every single cell of its body, which is not a good thing because insects can build up resistance to this if it's overused. There's just a million things that are wrong with that. But anyway, BT has been used by organic farmers for decades, maybe even centuries, a very long time. It's perfectly safe, is organic, it's a type of bacteria, and they use it very sparingly. That's the thing. They don't use it a lot. So with the GMO, it's every cell of the plant. So as soon as a bug takes a bite of it, it dies, and it's not good. So don't be scared by that. I know that freaked me out at first. It's like, this is BT. I was like, what? But It's really, it's not too bad. Let's see. Okay, so Entrust is another one. Spinosad is the ingredient in that, and it's another microbe spray. And it's used for a number of different insects. It's actually now in flea treatments for dogs and cats. It's one of the ingredients in there, which Clay knew that, and he told me. I was like, okay, it's fun of full little tips like that. So MPED or Safer are two other insecticides, and they prevent insects from breathing through their exoskeleton, so you need to make contact with the insect. It's not going to do any good if it's just on the plant. And Safer also apparently is used to protect against powdery mildew, which is a big issue, rust spots, and fungal issues. And lastly, Trilogy, which has neem in it. Neem is from the neem tree in Africa. You can get neem oil. The neem oil is extracted from the seeds of the tree. And Trilogy is also very expensive, so you can look for neem oils available in a lot of different forms. So that was just the one that he used. So for squash bugs, he used neem, and he also used pyrethrum. And he also said that you can put down a board at night in between the plants, like a piece of cardboard even. And then in the morning, you can pick it up, and all the bugs will have traveled underneath the board at night. And so you can either, he would like torch it, or he would put like soapy water on it to drown them or something. But just a really natural way, just put down a piece of cardboard in between the crop, and the bugs should gather, probably because it's dark, cooler space at night. But yeah, just interesting tip. No chemicals required. Okay, just real quick, a couple other bugs. I know some of these were at the garden this year, but Clay's had all these on his farm. So in order to fight the bugs, you got to be able to identify them. You got to know which ones are good and which ones are bad. So grasshoppers, yeah, I asked him, they are bad. They've never given him much of a problem, so he doesn't spray anything for them or take any means to try to kill them. It is mainly just chewing holes in the leaves and then chewing some of the beans, but they really don't do enough damage for him to worry about it. But they are bad. So if you see one, that's not good. So the Mexican bean beetle is kind of ladybug, and that's pictured up there on the top. So it's orange with black spots. It's a little bigger than the average ladybug, and its larvae look like bright yellow cotton balls. It was really interesting. I didn't see any of them, but I looked at a picture online. It looks like cotton. So the larva will eat through the leaves of a bean plant very quickly, so that's not good. And he uses spinosad to fight these beetles. So the spotted bean beetle is 1/4 of an inch long. It's red with black spots. It's rectangular, and it also eats beans, and he also uses spinosad for those. Green worms, they put holes in the beans, and he said spinosad and BT are both good for those. Okay, so squash bugs. They are a problem. They cause quite a bit of damage to the squash crop. So the bug feasts inside the plant. So it actually penetrates and it sucks the sap out, which kills the plant. So insecticides, surface insecticides, are potentially ineffective there because it's going inside the plant to feed. It's not feeding on the outside of the plant. But he still used pyrethrum, which is surface. And he also recommended soap and water spray. And so the board is again good because they tend to live at the bottom of the plant, at the base, so they'll be more likely to go onto that board. And he said that mulch might be a protection for them because you're mulching, they live down there, they can hide in the mulch, so just something to keep in mind. Not that, mulch is a very good thing, but just something to keep in mind for squash. Okay. And he said, if able, check the plant regularly to see if there are any eggs, and you can get rid of the eggs by hand before they grow into mature bugs. So around June, they normally start laying their eggs. So he said to do weekly scans of the crops, if possible, to make sure that there aren't any. And he said that squash bugs can overwinter too, so they might come up in that compost pile, but they didn't seem super hard to kill. And stink bugs, I kept getting these confused because they look very, very similar. They look very similar to a mature squash bug. The younger squash bugs don't look the same. But they enjoy pretty much anything from apples to tomatoes to soybeans, so they'll pretty much eat whatever. And they also pierce the crop, but they mainly cause cosmetic damage, so they're not really killing the plant. They create bumps on the surface of tomatoes. I saw a lot of tomatoes with little bumps on them. It was from the stink bugs. The stink bugs were everywhere in North Carolina, everywhere. But They just stomped on them. As soon as they saw them, just stomped on them. And I just got accustomed to doing the same thing, try to get rid of them. But other than that, they just use row covers. He'll use those. He'll lay the board down, or he'll do a soapy water mix for those two. And all these treatment methods that I've discussed, he recommended Johnny Selected Seeds, and then Seven Springs Farm is really good to purchase some of them if you're interested. Okay, so disease, now that we're past the bugs. This quote, which is really funny, the key to watering tomatoes is to hold an umbrella over them. Clay Smith. So this is a farmer that I stayed with, and that was actually, obviously that's not really possible, but it was funny. There's a lot of truth to that, which I'll explain, and I'll explain that picture too. So early blight is a disease that often strickens the tomato plant, and pretty much it's a microbe that grows in the soil. And so when it rains and the soil gets splashed on the foliage of the plant, you're bringing up that microbe, and so the microbe is then attacking the tomato plant. And so you can see, hopefully in this picture, they're not looking so hot there. These are tomato plants. They had early blight. You can see there's a row house in the back, a hoop house, a high tunnel, lots of different names for it. But he put those over other tomato plants, eggplants, bell peppers, and they were doing a lot better. But the ones that were left out in the rain and got stuff splashed on them all the time, they had early blight, and they died pretty quickly. And so he uses drip irrigation. That's a way to help prevent this. So it's pretty much this tube, and I'll show you a picture of it later, just a black tube that runs along the base of the plant. There's a little blue line, and every 12 inches there's a little hole. And so it literally, water drips out of there, and he'll leave that on for like 3 to 4 hours, 2 to 3 hours, 3 to 4 times a week. And he'll do that so you're getting the water directly to the root, and you're not getting the foliage wet at all. So obviously we can't do that in the garden, but if it...
Did somebody have drip irrigation?
Brian filmed.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the plot.
Well, I guess it's not easy. Yeah.
2 down. He's got it. I told him he can keep there for the winter, so if you want to run up there and go take a look,
Huh.
it's there.
I know there's different types. Like there's some that are thinner that you have to throw away, and other thicker ones you can reuse. So the second farm he had thicker ones, and he would reuse them for like 5 years.
Yeah.
The first farm he had to throw them away.
Brian bought the parts and did it himself.
Nice.
He knows people at John Deere, and they kind of told him how to do it.
How to do it? No, it's really good. It's a really water efficient way to do it. I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but let's see. He suggested you can put a plastic cover over the tomato plant as long as it's just a cover. You're not blocking the sides because you need airflow. You need to be able to get sunlight in there. When you're watering by hand, really get down there at the root. Try not to get everything else wet. And he also said putting down some kind of a ground cover over the soil, or putting down mulch to keep the microbe in the soil. You're not splashing it up onto the plant. And then splitting tomatoes, we had a lot of issues with that. Just too much water, too much rain. You can't help that if Mother Nature decides to rain a lot. But if you're the one that's putting too much water in there, then you can help that. So don't water too much. Powdery mildew, this is really interesting. There's a big site, which is right here. NC State does a lot of agriculture related things. And so they have this link here is for a map to track powdery mildew. They track it by county. It's pretty cool. So when someone gets it, they notify NC State and they put it in there, and then I think it's even like so many days since we've had a recording of the powdery mildew here. Pretty much it's always going to be a problem. It's always in Florida, and then travels up the East Coast. It's windborne. There's no stopping it. So that's going to happen every year. But this is cool because you can track it and you can see where is it coming from my plants yet. So pretty much the first farmer, he doesn't plant any kind of squash, which is what it hits after July. And then the second farmer, he was still growing watermelon and all sorts of squash when I was there, and he said it's like, it doesn't really bother me. It doesn't really, trouble the plants as much. So I don't know. He was better with it. I didn't see any evidence of it really. It was the end of the season, but he just lets it run its course and keeps planting. But pretty much the advice that the first farmer said was just plant crops as soon as you can before the powdery mildew gets here, the ones that would be affected by it. Okay, so just a couple other tips for the plants. So if you're growing potatoes, you need to buy organic, certified disease-free potato seeds. So you're not buying an actual seed, you're buying the potato, which the eye then sprouts, and that's how the potato grows. So you're either going to be buying a tiny little potato, or they come in chunks, a bigger potato cut in chunks with an eye. You want one eye per chunk, at least one eye. So every year he would buy from like a new batch. He wouldn't reuse, he wouldn't try to save potatoes from the following or the previous year, because he wanted to make sure that they were disease-free. Let's see. So he plants them after the last frost in the spring, and yeah, he said it's really important to get them all out of the ground, because if they stay in the ground, then they can carry disease over to the following year. Okay, so garlic, this was huge. There's a picture there, that's my hand. It's that doesn't do it justice. I mean, this was it looked like elephant garlic, but it wasn't. It was regular garlic. And we planted it before I left. And again, he buys certified disease-free garlic, organic garlic, and he said you can plant it 2 times, either 6 to 8 weeks before the first frost in the fall, or in early spring as soon as the ground can be worked. So you have 2 options. Either way, you're going to harvest in June. It's just going to be a little bit bigger. It's going to have more time to grow if you're planting it in the fall. And so to plant it, you just dig a hole. You place the clove about 3 inches down and 6 inches apart from one another, and then you put a little bit of dirt over it, and you really don't need to water too much for that. It just kind of does its thing over winter. And so then this bottom picture, these little white balls, those are pelleted lettuce seeds. I don't know, I'm sure you guys have seen lettuce seeds, but they're like microscopic. They're so hard. You end up putting like 5 in a little spot when you mean to put 1. But these are pelleted lettuce seeds. I had never seen them before, but they're very easy. So those are organic, obviously. So you can look into getting those if you're tired of the little tiny ones. So cayenne peppers, he was growing those. He's growing a lot of different kind of peppers. But cayenne was one of those, and they begin to soften on the plant, and so it just means that they're aging and they're drying up, so they can dry on there, and then he'll just take them off, and they're nice and soft, and then you can grind them into powder, and they get cayenne. And so green peppers, I'll talk about this photo, but green peppers are simply unripened peppers. They'll eventually turn red or yellow or orange. And so I didn't know this. Most purple bell peppers, if you guys have seen those at like farmers markets or you've grown them, most of those breeds are unripened peppers as well, and they will turn red, white, all different colors. So this is a ripened, it started off this purple color that's here, and it turned, let me see, I have it, I think it was white and then orange and then red. So it turned all different colors, and at this time it was so super sweet. And these were tiny little guys too, little bell peppers, but it was cool. It was so colorful. There was like 4 different colors on it. So that he's grown a lot of different kind of peppers. And interestingly, the heat in peppers, capsaicin is the chemical compound that gives heat to the pepper. Most people think that it is in the seeds of the pepper, but it's actually not. It's the placental wall of the pepper that has the heat, and when that placental wall sheds, it gets onto the seeds, and so that's why people think the seeds are hot. But if you take out the seeds when you're cutting up a pepper, you will take heat away, but it's not from the seed itself. It just, the heat got onto the seed, the capsaicin. So, yeah. Neat fact. Okay. Okay, so just 2 other things. So the first farm, he had me plant things in a hole. So pretty much he would dig out with his little trowel. He would drop the seedling in, and then he would push like a little bit of dirt on top of it, but pretty much it looked, you can see, like this. So the plant is in the ground, and then the soil level is above it. There's a little hole there. The point of that is so that when he waters or the drip irrigation, it'll all go directly to the root ball. So water's not running off all over the plate creating weeds. It's going right to the plant. And the second farmer, he was very adamant about planting to the growth point, so it didn't become leggy. So pretty much where really you don't want much of a stem hanging out there. As soon as the leaves, you want to get that right to the ground there, so it doesn't get leggy. And then this other picture on the right. I don't remember which farmer it was, but they pointed out that to test the health of a seed and if it's going to germinate, you can put 10 or so seeds in a wet paper towel, put the towel in a Ziploc bag, and then you leave it inside the house in sunlight for several days, and you want the temperature to be at the approximate germination temperature of the seed. So you got to look on the pack and see what it is. Then after a few days, you can check how many seeds have germinated, if any have germinated. If they did there, then they'll most likely germinate in the ground as well. Okay, and this is the last slide before I talk about the farm experience, but one of the books, it was Seed to Seed, which I'll talk about at the end, but it was really cool because it broke down, it really gave me a good understanding of how these different plants are related, in the nightshade family or whatever it was. So I just listed, you have the different breakdowns of the plant kingdom, and so eventually this is, the variety here is an indigo rose tomato. So that is a pretty awesome looking tomato, in my opinion. Looks indigo, but, and I also have, so like the tomatillo is related to that, but it's just has a slightly, same family, different genus, different species, and the common name is tomatillo, but it's in the same family. So it was just a cool book because it really gave you a good understanding of how these things are related. And so, you know, treatment methods might be similar. You know, just understanding what plants are related is really helpful. Okay, so I'm going to talk about my experience. I'll give you a lot more visuals now, a lot more pictures from the farm. So the first farm that I went to was Redbud Farm. Okay, so the first farm, I'll crease down here, I'll crease low. Okay, so the first farm that I went to was Redbud Farm, which is in North Carolina. And so Clay Smith, I've talked about Clay. Clay Smith was his name. He was a farmer. He was almost 70 years old. Oh my gosh, he was awesome. He was out there like 7 days a week doing stuff, never took a break. This guy, he was just going. So he actually grew up on the land, and his parents bought it in like the 40s for like $10,000. It was 120 plus acres of land. It's unbelievable. And so he grew up on the land, he moved away, and now he came back about 5 years ago. So he started in 2009. He started this farm with his wife Nancy, and it is a certified organic farm. And they currently use 8 acres of the land. He split the land with his brother. He also uses the land. So he owns about 60 something. But he only utilizes 8, which is still a lot for a almost 70-year-old man. But so 8 acres of vegetables and herbs. And they also have fruit for personal use. So I listed, these are the crops that they grow to sell. And they also, yeah, that's a lot. So they also had figs, blueberries, asparagus for personal use. So I got to work with almost all of these. They had the okra. They had 3 different kinds of sweet potatoes, which I'll talk about. They have 6 or more, I can't even remember how many different kinds of regular potatoes they had, different colors and everything. They had 3 colors of globe eggplant. They had 3 colors of oriental eggplant, 3 colors of Indian eggplant, bell peppers, sweet Italian peppers, poblanos, jalapenos, cayennes, Indian chilies, heirloom tomatoes. I'll show you a picture of those. Roba tomatoes, different types of salad tomatoes, 3 kinds of cherry, bitter gourd, edamame, radishes, beets, turnips, green and red lettuce, arugula, spinach, collards, Swiss chard, kale, fennel, kohlrabi, cabbage, cilantro, basil, rosemary, sage, thyme, baby ginger, and zinnias. So a lot. That's a lot for someone to handle. He's pretty much doing it by himself. And like I said, for personal use, they had 10 different kinds of fig trees, which were cool. Some of them were tiny, some of them were really big. And they had different kinds of blueberry trees, and the asparagus, they're hoping to bring that to market eventually. Right now it's kind of young. And I'll talk a little bit about asparagus in a minute. Okay, so tomatoes. These are their heirloom tomatoes, some of them. So starting from the left, we have a Cherokee purple, which is absolutely delicious. It is purple and red. Then the German Johnson, which is the favorite of the South, at least in North Carolina. Everyone would go crazy for German Johnson tomatoes. It was the biggest thing in the spring. They're just sold up like that. They would actually do, it's just kind of disgusting, but white bread, mayonnaise, and German Johnson tomatoes, that was the thing, that was the sandwich that they would eat. It's very, very popular. But anyway, and then the middle, that's just regular salad tomato. Then the Kellogg's breakfast tomato, which is the yellow one, big yellow guy there. That was pretty good. I like that one too. It's very sweet. And then there's just a yellow salad tomato and then a green unripened tomato. And the very, very end there's bitter gourd, which I have another picture of later. And I'll talk about that. That was a really interesting crop that they grew. Okay, so Clay, what did he do? His methods and techniques were pretty similar actually to the farm in South Carolina. But like I said before, he used drip irrigation. So this uses a lot less water than flood or other manual types of watering. So it's very efficient. Like I said, it's a plastic hose, which you can see there. That's the hose. It goes down the line there, and the little blue strip in the middle, that's every 12 inches. There's a little hole, and that's where the water is going to come out. It's going to drip out. Okay. So it slowly spreads out from the drip point. So even though it's 12 inches apart, the plants might be closer than that. But it'll spread out over the hour that it's left on. So the benefits, the water's going straight to the root. You're not wasting any water. You're not getting the foliage wet. You're not growing any weeds, which is nice because there are relatively no weeds unless it's on that strip because the water's staying in one spot. And you're wasting a lot less water. So that's really good, especially as an organic farm. That's something that they're concerned about. So cover crop, he always plants one grain and one legume in the fall. So this is before the end of September on the empty fields. So fields that he's done with, he's already harvested everything from them. He recommended sowing in a cover crop if possible in our garden plots. If there's space and if you're still growing crops in the fall, you can plant them around the other crops if there's space. If you're all done with your crops in September, then you can plant, he said oats or crimson clover are both good for the area up here. And he plants hairy vetch and rye as well as the crimson clover and the oats. So the purpose of the cover crop, it's very important. It's to prevent the erosion of the soil over the winter. And it also adds, like I said before, it adds organic matter once it dies. All the nutrients go back into the soil. And it preserves organic matter that's already in the soil by protecting the soil from exposure to sun, to too much oxygen, and all that stuff. He said after mid-October, it's really not worth planting a cover crop up here. It's not going to have enough time to grow. The frost is going to be too soon. So he does it in September, end of September. Okay, so I learned how to drive a tractor. That was fun. That was really fun. I think I have a picture of it too. I drove a couple. One was like a 1950s tractor, old tractor, and then one was a little bit newer. But the newer one had a tiller on the back, so I got to till some fields. So I just want to talk about tilling. So pretty much I would drive over the harvested rows, and it pretty much just flattens them out. It mixes up the soil and it flattens it out. It makes a nice bed. But tilling is exposing the nutrients that are in the soil to the sun, to more oxygen and excess water, rain if it's going to rain. So any organic matter that was in the soil is going to quickly be used up, which is not good, and it's going to be permanently gone. So really you want minimal tilling, which is a lot of organic farms are going for that now. Minimal tilling is good, so you can save that organic matter. And so after I would till, he would go through with another tractor and add a fertilizer mix before he planted the cover crop in. And then I use the seed spreader on some of them, so it's pretty much this container that you carry on the side of you. And there's this little crank that you turn, and you just walk really fast through the fields, turning this crank, and it just spreads seed out in all directions. So that was fun. And then he also went through on some of the fields with a harrow. Pretty much it just puts a little bit of dirt on top of those cover crops that you just spread out with the seed spreader. It doesn't go very deep. You can adjust it, the angle of the harrow, so that it'll go a certain depth in the soil, but it'll go a maximum of 2 inches, so really not far down. And then he plants specific cover crops depending upon when he's going to be harvesting the next year. So if one takes longer to grow, he's going to plant that one that he's planting something in later on in the season, if that makes sense. Let's see. And if you don't plant a cover crop, or you can't in the garden if you're still growing stuff and it's October now or something, he suggests putting mulch down, so that'll also stop the soil from freezing as quickly, and it'll help, less damage will occur in the soil, and it'll keep the beneficial microbes, the nutrients alive as much as possible. So hay or leaves will also work, or actual, wood chips, mulch. Let's see. I already talked about that. Just more about soil testing. So yeah, again, soil testing, very good. He does it every year. He was actually doing it while I was there, so I got to see him packaging everything up. Okay, yeah, here just some pictures. I took this picture while I was on the tractor. This is the sweet potato field we had just harvested. So I was going over and see how these rows are nice and flat now. That's what it did. And then that's Farmer Clay. He's out there. He's not, I don't know what he's doing. He's just driving down, I think again at the end of the field there. Okay. So just a little bit on how he cuts his greens. So arugula, he will cut that and then that'll regrow, which I didn't know that. It'll regrow a couple times. So he'll just chop it at the bottom. And when he goes to pick it for market next week, there'll be a whole new batch of arugula ready to go. And he did that maybe 4 times, I think. So that's pretty neat. Things like bok choy lettuce and turnip greens, they don't regrow, so that's a one-time harvest if you chop it at the bottom. If you're not just picking leaves off, you're actually chopping the plant off, which is what he does. He'll just chop off a head or a bunch because it's not a long maturation period, so it's not really worth it for him to pick it and then keep coming back. So he'll just plant more. Every week he's planting lettuce from seed or bok choy from seed or whatever from seed, so that he always has a crop every week a seedling crop that he's putting in the ground, so he's never without it. Let's see. So turnip greens, I got to have those for the first time. So pretty much he would just chop off the leaves of the turnips, leave the white turnips in the ground. He would sell those eventually later, but he would sell just the greens. People would eat them. You have to cook them for a while. They're very tough. They have like little tiny hairs on them, so they're not, they don't look too palatable. But I had them. They were good. They have an interesting taste to them. It was a big thing down in the South. They would eat turnip greens just like they would eat collards. And then bigger leaves like collards, kale, Swiss chard, those he would pick the big ones. He would cut the big ones from the outside and they would just, keep growing. So he wouldn't chop those all off. So yeah, here's a picture top of his Swiss chard. Lots of different colors, very, very pretty. Leaves got very big. Bottom left, we have some bok choy. So he would just chop that off. I had that too, it was very good. And then his collards over there on the bottom right. A lot of different greens, but the time I was leaving, there's one field and it was just everything was green. There you go, that's the next slide. There's a field, and it is bigger than it goes on, but yeah, I mean, just it was gorgeous. All different kinds of greens in there, but it was this massive field of green. He had a couple different kinds of collards, which you see here, and there was chard off to the side. I think these are radishes, maybe a little tall for radishes. Okay, so for cutting the basil, I got to do that a lot. As soon as it would start to go to seed, he would chop off the top portion, so that way it grows wider rather than it shooting up. So then he would sell in little packages, he would sell the top piece of clipped basil. And so that way there's not really much stem there either, so people are getting more leaves for their money. And he would bring those to market, they would sell so quickly. And he would also bring them to, there was a store which I'll talk about in a minute, but he would bring them there as well. He'd package them up, put little Redbud Farm label on them, and bring them to market. Okay, so common insects. The top picture there looks like spit, which I was very confused with what the heck that was when I was out there harvesting. It's slimy. It feels like spit. So it's from this bug on the bottom here. It's a spittle bug, and pretty much it's a frothy substance that's made of plant sap from the basil leaf that this bug eats, whatever the sap, and it secretes that spit-like substance. And it is not good. In the nymph stage, that's when it's doing the spitting. It's also called the frog hopper. I don't know if I have never heard of that one either, but 2 names for it. Grasshoppers and bees are also found on basil. Grasshoppers not good, bees very good. Both of them are commonly visiting the basil. Okay, so as I said before with sweet potatoes, there's a 3-year rotation for those guys. Is
that your hand?
Yeah, it's my hand. I needed a reference for some size. But yeah, I mean, I've never seen bigger sweet potatoes. They were massive. There was one that another volunteer, it was from his elbow all the way to the end of like his forearm. It was massive. And these are some sweet potatoes growing in the ground here. And then over there's Farmer Clay. There were Girl Scouts that visited when I was there, and they helped to dig up sweet potatoes. And so that they were so excited. And he was, of course, really grateful. They're free help there. But he was just out there showing them. He just dug up that row. And if you can see, it's like there's like white. That's where the harvester sliced the potato down the middle. Because even though you plant them in a row, they grow all underground. They're growing all off to the side and everywhere. So it's very hard to harvest them in a straight line. So you end up cutting a lot of them sometimes. So yeah, rotating them every 3 years so the disease isn't spreading, and also for nutrient. You don't want to lose nutrients. So the two main types of sweet potatoes were the Carolina Rubies and the Covingtons. They're both, the Covingtons those were created at NC State, I believe. No, apologize, one of those was. But anyway, they met this girl at a market, and she was the granddaughter of Covington, who the potato was named after. So it was really cool that the farmers got to meet her. But yeah, the Carolina Rubies were like these guys. They're redder, where the top one there is much more orange. That was a Covington. The Rubies tend to be a lot thinner and longer, a lot stringier. So not a lot of farmers grow those because they don't get as good a yield. Not as desirable, but they're the sweetest potatoes that I've ever tasted. They were absolutely delicious. They have a very thin skin on them. They're not too thick. The Covingtons were also delicious, don't get me wrong, but just different. The Rubies were really a unique sweet potato, and people would just go crazy over them. And he also planted Japanese sweet potatoes, which is what's in the picture there. They're white on the inside. They're not sweet. Not as sweet as you'd think a sweet potato would be. They're used in teriyaki style dishes. And so there's several customers that requested him to grow certain plants. And so they would bring him organic seeds and, here, can you plant this? And he would do it. So he had several rows of Japanese sweet potatoes, and this one woman, she bought like a ton of them. So it was cool. It was really cool that he would take what his customers wanted and actually grow the stuff on the farm. He did that for a lot of things, so that was cool. Okay, so where to get his income? This was interesting to learn about. So he had two different markets that he would go to on a weekly basis. One was at Elon University. That was a pretty small market. There were only a few vendors there. And then the Western Wake Farmers Market, which was in Morrisville, North Carolina, which is outside of Raleigh. It's not too far from Raleigh. That was a lot bigger. So they got 80% of their income from this one market on Saturday. So that was cool. And they also sell to company shops, food co-op, and an Indian bistro. This bottom right picture, that is outside the co-op there. I went there, oh my gosh, almost like every day with the farmer. He was bringing them something, or we'd go there for food. They had a hot bar. It was kind of like a Whole Foods, but a lot cooler, in my opinion. It was really cool. It was tiny. It was such a community space. The people had business meetings there for lunch. It was a college hangout. I mean, just such a wide variety of people that would go there. It was started a few years ago, but it's been really successful. They have local bands that play there every Friday night. They have wine tasting from local wineries and beer tasting from local breweries, and just so many events that go on there. And I got to know on a first name basis like the entire staff by the time I left. It was really cool. I went to fundraising meetings there as well. They were trying to finish the upstairs space to make it a community meeting room. And so I got to go. Clay was really involved in that, the farmer. So he would take me everywhere with him. I got to see so many different things. So it was really cool. I actually have, this was the Burlington magazine, that's the town, but the co-op was on the front page, so these are all the people that I got to meet. But there's a little article in here, and it talks about they get as much as they can from local farmers, and they put out a weekly, kind of like an Excel sheet, but it's online, and the farmer, it's emailed out to different farms in the area, and it's like, okay, this is what we need this week. And so the farmer will just go in, and it's automatically updated when he goes in. I can give you 20 bags of basil or whatever. So next farmer goes in, all right, basils I can see that's done. So, oh, but you need apples or whatever they have. So it's cool. And they try to get as much local as they can. And then when the farmers, okay, nobody can give us this product this week, then they'll go and they'll get organic from somewhere else. But they try to do local as much as possible, which is really cool. But if you guys want to look at this or the article in there. The Indian bistro was also very delicious. I love Indian food, so that was awesome. We went there for lunch. And he brought them Indian eggplant, which I'll show you guys a picture of. And chilies, Indian chilies, and what else? Potatoes and okra. He'd bring those. So that was interesting. He wouldn't get paid for the food that he brought to the bistro. He would get gift cards to the bistro. And he was actually in the Peace Corps. He lived in India for several years. So he was very accustomed to the cuisine, and he loved it. So that was a great exchange for him. And I loved it too, because I got to go there for lunch. But it was cool. And it was cool to know that what I was helping to grow was being produced, in the food that I was eating. So, and then lastly, there's an at-home delivery system, which is cool. Every Sunday they would email about 75 people or so on this email list that they had. And they would give them, okay, we have these 10 items for sale this week, knowing that they would have enough to take to market, and this was the extra that they would have, because market was their big money maker. So they would send out this email list, and by Monday at 3 p.m., whoever wanted to order would email back, okay, I'll have so many pounds of tomatoes, or so many pounds of potatoes, or 3 bell peppers, or something like that. So we would collect for the orders, and then we'd actually go around, and the farmer would bring it to their place of work or to their house. It was pretty cool. Yeah, I thought that was pretty awesome. And it was cool to meet the people. Like, who are these people that are ordering? What kind of people care enough about local food? So it was nice. And he was on, first name basis with these people. He knew about their lives. So it was really unique relationship there. So now for some fun stuff, some interesting crops. So a few pictures here, 4 different crops. A few of these were new to me. I'd never seen them before, or at least never seen them grown before. So bitter gourd, this is the bottom right here. It looks very spiny. It is. It's very interesting. It's also called bitter melon. It's from the Asian continent. It's used in a lot of Indian, Chinese, Thai, and Pakistani cooking. It's about the size of a cucumber, small cucumber. It has very rubbery texture. It does not feel like food, a plant. It feels very, very rubbery. And it's eaten when the fruit is green, so it's immature still. It'll turn yellow, but that's not when they eat it. They eat it when it's green still. And it is bitter, just like the name. And so pretty much they stuff it like a bell pepper. They'll core it and they'll stuff it. They'll saute it, or they'll add it to soups. And unfortunately, it can't be grown in the Northeast. I checked, but I don't think it's warm enough here for that. And so asparagus, I've eaten asparagus. I love asparagus, but I'd never seen it grown. So that top right picture, that's asparagus growing there. I tried to get one that looked as much like asparagus as possible, but it looked like dill when it's very young. It's so tiny. And so you let it go to seed the first 2 years when you're growing it. And then 3rd or 4th year, you can begin some harvesting. And what you need to do is you need to snip it at a certain point on the stalk so that it'll keep growing back. And it'll actually grow back for up to 20 years, the same plant. So that's pretty cool. You'll keep getting asparagus. So that was cool. So theirs was still pretty young. I think they were able to cut some of it to eat for themselves this year, but they're hoping in the future, when it gets bigger, to be able to sell it. So figs, this is a fig tree. I love figs. I'd never seen one though. And then also in the middle, those little brown guys, those are figs on there. So like I said, there were 10 different varieties of figs on the farm. They had everything from Turkish, and they had a bunch of different green varieties as well that would stay green. And the last one, baby ginger. This picture I did not take, the rest of them I did, but it looked exactly like that. I just didn't have a chance to take a photo of it. But pretty much it's immature ginger. But it's highly profitable. This is probably one of their biggest sellers at Redbud. And so pretty much the root has not developed the brown skin that's normally on ginger, so you don't have to peel this. You can just eat this, grate it right up. It's white and pink in color, as you can see. It's not stringy, it doesn't have that stringiness that ginger normally has. It has a different, it's like a sweet flavor. It's really delicious. And you can freeze this, so it's cool. You can buy it in bulk and you can freeze it and have it over the winter. You can take it right out of the freezer and grate it and into your dish. You don't have to do anything with it. And then stick it back in there. So on the farm, it's grown in these big black pots. And it started in the winter or the early spring in a greenhouse. And he buys, from Hawaii, he buys normal ginger, big mature ginger. And then he pre-sprouts that in the greenhouse in the early spring. And so in Hawaii, that's where most of the baby ginger that you would get is grown, and they keep it outside all year round. But in North Carolina, it's not so warm in the winter and the early spring, so he has to start it and pre-sprout it in the greenhouse. So once it sprouts and it gets bigger, then he'll move it to bigger and bigger and bigger pots, and eventually when it's warm outside and the temperature stays around the same from day to day, he'll put them outside. Let's see, and so he never, just like with the potatoes, he never reuses ginger, or he doesn't buy store-bought organic ginger. He gets certified disease-free ginger, just because it's a lot at stake. You know, that's where he's making his money. If it's all wiped out from disease, that's, you know, it's not that big of a deal to go that extra step to get the disease-free stuff. And also you can make tea from the ginger leaves. So I did that. I picked some leaves from a plant, on the ginger plants outside, and I made some tea for myself, and it was good. And just some other ones. So the Indian eggplant, which I talked about before, these little guys. So that's as big as they'll get. They're tiny, they're short. And a lot of people get really confused, and they're like, they're not done growing yet. Like these are, no, but it's a different variety. So that's as big as they're gonna get. They're different colors. Some are striped, they have purple, and they have white on them. Others are just purple. That's pretty much the only difference between a regular eggplant. It's just smaller. But the Indian restaurant loved that. So okra, which is the top right, very, very pretty flowers, very tall plant, produces a really pretty flower though. So when the fruit or the okra which you eat, it gets about 2 inches long, that's when you want to harvest it. If it gets 4 inches or more, then it's going to be too tough to eat. So that's not good. And it's inedible. So there's also red okra, which I had never seen until I went to the second farm, and they had red okra there. And that can actually get a little bit bigger, and it won't get too tough. Tough as the green stuff. And so you have to wear gloves, long sleeves, and pants while harvesting this stuff, because you will get itchy later. It's like zucchini leaves or tomato leaves. There's little prickles on there. It'll get you. So you had to be fully covered. So this is not something you wanted to do in the middle of the day in the Carolinas, and it was really hot. You wanted to do this in the morning. And also the bees would come out. And the second farm, there were fire ants, love okra. And so there were fire ants all over the okra plants. And that was not fun. Not fun at all. And Clay said actually that his plants have reached 15 feet high. So that is very tall. That is hard to harvest by hand. So pretty much you had the plant and you just had to pull it backwards with you and go backwards and clip and then fling it back up. So it was labor intensive. Your neck hurt after a while, but okay, so this is a Japanese eggplant or an oriental eggplant, a lot of different names. They're just very long and skinny. He grew 3 different colors. And the picture in the middle and the bottom, that's edamame. And that's actually for a customer too. A customer suggested he grow that and gave him seeds, and he's like, okay. And now it's done really well. He sold out. He sells as much as he can grow, so that's good. Edamame, if you don't know, it is a type of soybean. It grows in the pod. You're not eating the pod, you just eat the seed. But he sells the beans just like that, so they're all rubber banded up by the pound. They keep better if they're still on the stalk and if they're still in the pod. So they'll keep for a little while. So pretty much to eat them, you can boil it, you can steam them, you can put them in the microwave. I boiled them, and then I just popped open the pods, and they were nothing like the store-bought ones. Oh my gosh, they were so good. So good. Okay, and then the final picture there, I hope you can see these right here. They're little peppers. There's little red guys in the back there. Those are Indian chili peppers. Very hot, very tiny. They're like that big, and very, very tiny. A lot of heat in those guys. A favorite in Indian cuisine, and surprisingly, Indians will just eat those as a snack. Just pop them in their mouth. I can't imagine. But very good in a bigger dish. And so they'll start off that dark green color, and then they'll turn a light green, and they'll also turn red. Okay, so mushrooms. Jen, I know you were interested in growing mushrooms.
Yep. Well, your mother and my husband said no.
Ah, so good though. These are the best mushrooms I've ever tasted. Oh my gosh. Okay, so he started to grow mushrooms this year, Clay. And to do this, he bought inoculated spawn from 2 different suppliers. He drilled holes every 6 inches in the log and placed dowels with the spawn on them. And then he covered them up with beeswax, which is the thing to do. And so he lets them sit for 6 months. It's a very long process. And then once the 6 months has passed, he soaked the logs in water for 24 hours. And then you take them out. So these are the logs soaking right here. They're in this big container of water. So then you take them out, and then mushrooms start to grow. So if you can see, there's little mushrooms there. So these are shiitake. That's what he was growing. And white oak is a very good wood for growing shiitake mushrooms, apparently. And then the end product is up there. They were delicious little guys. I love mushrooms, but they were exceptional. Let's see.
Did you die from eating them?
No, I did not. I'm still here. I'm here giving the presentation. Okay, so any log that you use should be at least 4 inches in diameter. And if you're using your own personal wood, you want to use the wood quickly after you chop it down, because then wild fungi will take home to it, which is not something you want. Don't want to mix those up. And Clay was told that for every inch of log he has, he'll have that many years of production. And I looked myself, and I found that a single log will produce for about 3 or 4 years, as long as it doesn't dry out. So I got some mixed answers on that one, but still maybe worth doing. And he sold these for about $12 a pound, which sounds like a lot, but they're very light, so you'd get a lot. Okay, so the second farm, this is shorter. I wasn't there as long. BioWay Farm, another organic farm. The farmer was Chris Shermans, and the land was purchased by his father, who passed away a couple years ago, and the land was left to his stepmother, but he is the farmer that's on the land. His stepmom is actually clearing land at the moment, some of the land, to put in mobile cabins for agritourism, which is pretty much someone pays to come and stay on the land. They're not working on the land necessarily, but they're paying to stay there on the farm. There were hunting grounds that were on the property, so they would be staying there for that. Where the farmer wasn't too keen on that idea, not at all. It's a lot of negativity there, but it was about 120 acres total. And again, only a small fraction of the land was being farmed because it was just the one farmer. And there was also a 5-acre pond on the property, which I'll show you a picture of. It was very pretty. So I'm not going to read, these are pretty similar. There's just a couple differences. I'll just talk about the ones that were different. But he grows vegetables, herbs, fruit, has 2 goats, and he would like to expand in the future to have chickens, pigs, and maybe cows. He's not using the goats for anything. They're just there, takes care of them. He likes them, so. So he has the same crops as Redbud. He just has a few additions. So he grew zucchini, summer squash and winter squash, watermelons, mustard greens, muscadines, dulce peppers, stevia, lemon verbena, lemon balm, and epazote. Yes, and there were more that were listed on his website that he grew, but those are just the ones that I saw, which is a lot still. Okay, so those are just some pictures. The top left one, that's a greenhouse. That's where we ended up storing all the sweet potatoes we harvested. And then just another field. This on the bottom left here, this is, it wasn't a great photo, but if you can see, this is a wide variety of fruits and vegetables. This is a CSA box, so all that was in one box, which is it was only $30 a share, which is way more than $30 worth of food, but I'll talk about the CSA in a minute. But that's the pond on the property. It was a very pretty pond. There's a little dock down there. It was very nice. A lot of spiders on the way down there, though. Okay, and so these are the different produce that he grew. Some different things. So the top there on the left, that's a delicata, winter squash. A zephyr zucchini is the middle one, the bicolored guy. On the right those are muscadines, which I was very confused what these things were when I saw them in the supermarket at first. I had never seen these. They looked kind of like olives to me. And it was very confusing, but it's just a type of grape, and they're either red or they're white. Red meaning that purple color. They get a little softer and they darken in color when they're ripening. So the picture there, those would be pretty ripe. They have a thick skin, not like a normal grape, and you don't want to eat the pit in there. But it's commonly used to make wine in the South. I had some really cool local muscadine wine that was really good. Okay, these are dulce peppers. They look like habaneros. That's what I thought they were at first. But he's like, no, eat one. I was like, are you trying to trick me right now? You want me to eat a habanero? But no, they're actually not too sweet, but they have a little heat to them, but nothing like a habanero. But he grew those on the farm. Epazote, that is commonly used in Mexican food. They'll pair it with bean dishes because it helps relieve gas. And so they'll pair it with bean dishes because beans may cause gas. So that was really interesting. He was growing that. This one here, we have stevia, and then in the middle we have lemon verbena, and we have lemon balm on the right, which looks like mint. And they all smell very delicious if you rub your hand with them. And the stevia really does taste exactly like the powdered stuff that you'd get at the store. So yeah, those were just some other unique foods that he was growing. Okay, so he kind of had, like I said before, similar methods as Clay. He used drip irrigation as well. He did use reusable lines, so they were thicker, so he could reuse them, I think he said, for up to 5 years. And then one of the fields, which was interesting, that had all the greens on it, there's no irrigation on it at all, and he wouldn't water it. It was just by the morning dew and any natural rain. It looked really bone dry to me, but the plants were flourishing on it, so he knows more than I do. But it looked very, very dry. I was surprised by that. But the rest of them he used drip irrigation on. Okay, and so ground cloth is really important to squash production. I got to pull a lot of ground cloth out because you need to pull it out. Apparently to stay certified organic, he had to pull it out at the end of each season. So I had to help do that. It pretty much just prevents weeds from coming up, it would be a ton of weeds. They would be all over the place, and they still did come up, but it would have been a lot worse. Okay, and so just interesting, we counted, the person I was working with, he counted like over 30 black widow spiders when we were pulling up the ground cloth, and there were fire ant mounds like if it wasn't a black widow, then the next foot it would be a huge fire ant mound. So they like cool, dark places, so they were under the ground cloths. So you had to wear, completely head to toe. I was in like rain boots and long sleeve pants, a long sleeve shirt, hat, and this was, South Carolina in the middle of the day. It was very, very warm, but yeah, this just, makes you appreciate what the farmer has to go through to get you your food, right? And then I already talked about before, he was very adamant about planting up to the grow point. So I have a picture here. So the grow point would be right here, or even a little higher where the leaves start. And then so it's 3 tablespoons per gallon was his ratio of fish emulsion, but he also used that before he would plant his seedlings in the ground. Income, the exception to the CSA, was pretty similar. TD Saturday Market, which was in Greenville, there's a picture there on the top. And the monthly Earth Market, which is the slow food approved market, I had to look up what that meant. Pretty much they have an application process you have to go through. You have to meet all these standards in order to become approved to be a slow food market. So you have to be selling, if you're a vendor, you have to sell your own products. You can't be selling for anyone else. And you have to be making strides on your farm in water, soil, air, and land preservation. And so I'm not exactly sure what exactly that entails, but there is an application process. They have to approve you. So that's pretty cool. Let's see. So Chris, the farmer, he is a member of Slow Food USA. He actually traveled to Italy through a branch called Terra Madre, Mother Earth. So he traveled all the way to Italy to this conference and everything. So he was a cool guy. He knew a lot about environmental things, and he was really big on that. So it was cool. And then lastly, his third way of income was the CSA, which again, the picture there on the bottom. It was about $30 a week, and they would pay per week for the produce. And he would people could come to the farm and pick up their box, or he would deliver the other boxes to the Whole Foods in Greenville. And at Whole Foods, they would allow the boxes to be there and people could come and pick up their produce. So that was kind of cool. And the boxes are all reusable. They had like a wax coating on them, like a cardboard box with a wax coating. So they would use the boxes every week. So that was cool. Stuff you don't think about, like, that's great you're getting produce, but what are you wasting, you know? How are you getting it? But it's good it was reusable. Okay, so both farms were organic. So the first farmer, Clay, he gave me his organic certification paperwork, this huge pile of paper, this application that they have to go through, you know, once when they're first getting certified, and then they have to update it every year. So he shared with me all these unimaginable details. So pretty much in order to be organic, for 3 years, you cannot have any unpermitted substances, you know, chemicals, whatever, on the farm, in the soil. It needs to be completely organic for 3 years before you can become certified. That's just across the board. And then every year, in addition to updating the paperwork, an inspector comes out. So they'll spend about 3 or 4 hours on the farm and checking out your operation. What are you doing? How are you doing it? Making sure you're all checked out. And so just a couple of the sections on and I'll show you a picture, but field history, that was one of the sections you had to fill out. So you had to write down your field number, the year, the number of acres, what crops are being planted there, and the inputs, so what kind of fertilizer, how much fertilizer, all that stuff had to be recorded. Adjoining land, what's next to the field, what's the buffer, is it grassland, is it forest, and how wide is the buffer, and water system and sourcing, what kind of water, how are you getting your water, is it drip irrigation, is it flood, is it overhead, what's the source, is it a well, a pond from the county. And they want to know if you're sharing a water system with another farm, because the other farm might not be organic. So they want to, for contamination purposes, contamination was a huge thing on there. They don't want it to be compromised. And I think the next slide. Okay, yeah, so I took a picture. So this was, you know, your field name or number over here. How many acres is it? The crops, what are you growing there? And then the inputs, so the top one there, Harmony, that's the fertilizer at 8 pounds per 100 feet. So that's how much he was applying it. So they want to know how much, you know, fertilizer is going into the land there. That's just an example. But I mean, pages and pages of this stuff, so it was a whole lot. And just, whoop. Just on organic stock, so planting stock, meaning potatoes, potato seeds, garlic, ginger root, any bulbs, so things you can't get from seed. Those you have to use organic stock, except when the organic stock isn't commercially available. And with that, you can use non-organic, but it has to be non-GMO and it has to be untreated. So along with your organic certification paperwork, you have to submit documentation from your supplier that says this is not GMO and this is untreated stock. And so there's another section on pest, weed, and disease management. So they want to know what preventative measures are you taking for your pests? Are you using crop rotation? Are you using bird houses, trap crops? What measures are you using for weeds, newspaper? Is the ink glossy? Like that was a question on there. It was so specific, and what you're putting into the farm. And then preventative measures for disease. They have to list all inputs. So an input is any biological or botanical substance or allowed synthetic on the national list. So there's a list that's certain things are allowed for organic production. So it has to be on that list. And you have to report that you're using it. So crop contamination, they want to know if you're checking for that. Is it visual? Are you scanning? Or are you doing GMO testing? How are you checking that nothing is being contaminated on your farm with another crop? And then soil quality, they want to know about tillage and cultivation. Again, like I said before, minimal tilling is preferred. And then contour farming or permanent waterways, are you using either of those? And I just have a picture there of contour farming as well. Okay, we're almost done. Okay, so one thing that I learned, a lesson from my whole experience, was really get to know your farmer. Where is your food coming from? How are they making it? How how are they treating their employees, how are they treating their animals, if it's applicable, if they have animals on the farm. There are a lot of different reasons for that. I saw, like I said, Clay knew the customers so well, first name basis. He knew about their kids, knew about their job, knew about life history. I mean, he knew these people really well, and it was really cool to see that. At the market, at company shops, home delivery, all of those. He wasn't just a guy that was growing their food. So let's see. So just, an advantage for you to get to know your farmer. They get to know what you want, and they give you better deals. I saw a lot of that at the market. They'll grow products for you. If you say, can you grow this seed for me? Here it is. Okay, I will. And he does that. He'll set aside and he'll save a product if he knows a customer can't get there till 11 and the product sells out by 10 a.m. So he'll set products aside for them and he'll wait for them. He'll throw in extra tomatoes if he knows that they really like them. He did that all the time. Freebies all the time. So it was really cool. So there was an advantage to that. And then also what they called seconds, or the family basket. So things that were slightly cosmetically blemished or something like that they couldn't sell, put out on the table, but they would give someone a discount if they want seconds. So they would bring a basket of seconds for this one woman, and they'd give her a discount on it. The food was perfectly fine to eat, and so they would give that to her. So that was cool. You could ask maybe at the farmer's market that you attend, do you have seconds? Is that something that's available to me if you want to bulk up on something, get a lot of something? Let's see. So yeah, just appreciate what they're doing for you and what's going into production. What kind of pesticides are they using? If they're organic pesticides or insecticides, how much are they using? The farmers I was with, they use minimal, as little as possible, but a lot of them, organic farms, the big ones I'm sure, use, even though they're organic certified, they're still using the certified pesticides. So really know what inputs are going in there. And like I said, understanding some morals. How are they treating their employees? How are they treating the animals that they're raising? They're growing your food, so I think it's good to get to know them. There's a reason there. And then lastly, what is industrial organic? That's a newly coined term, and it's pretty much organic started off meaning it was small farm, meaning that it was sustainable, that it was it meant certain things, and now that word organic has kind of grown. Like they're organic mashed potatoes, boxed mashed potatoes. It's not what it started out to be, So in our industrial organic, pretty much these huge farms, like California Organics, or there's a ton of different ones, but they're just growing organic on such a large scale, and that's not the point of organic. And so it's a monoculture. They'll grow heads of baby lettuce. It's just the whole field is lettuce. And you want variety in there. And, they'll go through with machines, so you're polluting instead of, small farms, you're going out there and you're picking by hand, which is more labor intensive, which is why you maybe pay a little more, but it's that much better for the environment. And buying local, you're not shipping it across the country. So, again, much better. And you're supporting local business. So it's really never been easier to buy local. There's CSAs are coming up everywhere. Farmers markets are coming up everywhere. So at least I'm going to talk, I think, in the next slide about tips for the winter, because that's a problem. But, just when you're at the grocery store, look at that label. Where is it coming from? Is it coming from Peru or California? Or can you find a product that's at least on the East Coast? It's a little bit closer. I know it definitely is hard, but just putting in that extra second to look and see. Okay. This is the last slide. Okay. During the winter, obviously it's tough. We're in New Jersey. It's cold. Nothing's growing right now. So how are you, supposed to eat local? But, just shop at farmers markets as long as you can. They're open a decent way into the fall. And CSAs, they have boxes pretty late into the season sometimes as well. At the store, try to buy as local as you can. Also, stocking up on stuff. I have a picture of canned items here. At the farm, they canned tomatoes because they had so many extra tomatoes. They would do canned tomato sauce. They would do canned peppers. They did dried tomatoes. They did dried peppers. They really preserved a lot of things that they would have stuff to last over the winter, so they could still be eating fresh food. So really stock up on anything: fruits, vegetables, herbs. Can your own tomato sauce. can jams and jellies. You can freeze pretty much anything. You can freeze herbs, greens, anything. Just put it in a bag, put it in the freezer. Also a neat trick, if you freeze in ice cube trays, you put some herbs and some olive oil, you freeze it right in there, and the herbs will last. And then when you put it in soup or something, you have your oil and your herbs, and you put it right in there. So can, pickle, ferment, freeze was a big thing down there. There are a lot of vendors at the markets that were fermenting things or pickling things or all sorts of stuff. And they would buy in bulk. This one woman, she bought, this huge box of red jalapeno peppers, and she was making some kind of a spicy jam out of it that she would sell. But it was really interesting. Okay, so just recommended resources. Like I said, I just listed some of the books that I mentioned and a couple others. Gardening materials, organizations. So the Soul of Soil, that's a good one. Seed to Seed, that was one that broke down by the family and the species and everything. Resource Guide for Organic Insect and Disease Management, that was produced by Cornell. The First Farmer had that one. That was pretty cool. There were a lot of pictures, which is good to help you identify bugs and disease, what things actually look like. And then the Gardener's A to Z Guide, that was on the Second Farm. And I don't know if I couldn't find the author of that one. But again, it kind of went through all the different veggies, fruits, herbs, and spacing, organic disease control. Everything, every aspect. Really talked about that.
That might be in the shed. There might be a copy of that book in the shed.
Good. Never mind then. You can look at it at the shed. Garden materials. Those are just 3 sites that are good for buying seeds and then also buying the different products I talked about, even like row covers, that kind of stuff. And he also said you can use cheesecloth if you don't want to get row covers. So but that's a little easier to get. And then organizations, NC State, they, like I said, a lot of agricultural stuff going on there. And they have the powdery mildew tracking on there. So that's cool. Then Growing Small Farms, that's an organization through NC State, so you can get there. A lot of information on there. ATTRA is the National Sustainable Agriculture Information Service. Clay recommended getting a membership collectively as a garden. It's a reference site. You can search for pretty much anything. It'll come up with articles. So if you type in how to grow garlic, it'll come up with 1 million articles. Or new organic farming techniques. It's all sustainable organic farming. And so, yeah. Some of it is free, so you can go on there and check them out for free, and then other ones you need to be a member for. But he said it might be something to look into, as a garden to get a membership. Slow Food USA. That's always a great site for things. So Local Harvest too. Local Harvest is like a directory, how to get local products, what farmers markets are around you, what local events are coming up around you. So that's a good site too. And then the Carolina Stewardship Association, that was big down there. They have a conference every year. Clay's been to it, one of the farmers. It's in Durham this year. It was in Durham. And I think it was this past week actually. But it's just this cool conference on gardening and farming and all that stuff. But they have interesting stuff on their website too. And that was it. This is just some other sites that I used, but most of the information was from Farmer Clay and from the books that he gave me. Those are just for pictures mainly. But does anyone have questions? I know I talked a lot. Oh, yeah. I have Johnny's Selected Seed Catalog if anyone wanted to look at it. There's some really fun looking stuff in here though. Really cool. And then Clay took me to, it was the 2013 North Carolina Outstanding Conservation on a Family Farm Award Ceremony. Very long name. Isley Farm, which his grandmother actually lived on this woman's land for a while and gave her the land. But it was this farm. They're actually not certified organic, but they do a lot of sustainable practices. And so the governor of North Carolina was there. He gave a speech. It's this huge event. So it was awesome to go to. It was really awesome. And we took a tour of the farm, and there was gravity feed pumps to get the water to the cows, and just all different sustainable methods. And we got to go around the farm, and they showed us, this is why we got the award, and this is what we're doing to better the environment and help the land. So this is just a program of that, but it talks a little bit about the farm. And that's pretty much it.